Hello, this is Heather Alderman, the Executive Director of COSMA, and I'm here today to talk to you about preparing to write the self-study document. I'm going to focus on the first four principles in our document, and then I will concentrate on the other three principles next week or in another presentation. So please join me for that. So if you have gotten to this point where you're interested in writing the self-study document, your program has already been approved for candidacy status. So that means you have an outcomes assessment plan in place that is supposed to have excellent, well-written student learning outcomes. Your measurement tools and rubrics should be robust and measure those student learning outcomes, and that you have now collected at least a year's worth of data that you can analyze. And also, it is already determined which sport management programs will be included in this process, which should be all of them, although you may have petitioned the Board of Commissioners to exclude a degree program that maybe has the word sport in it, but that should be determined. And you should already have a sense of how you're going to work with the faculty within your academic unit and other individuals around your institution to help you write this document. You should not be doing it alone, or if you do, then you will, you may have some times when you're going to need to reach out to other people to give you some information. And really, what this document is answering all of our self-study guideline questions in the accreditation principles and self-study preparation manual. So that's what I'm going to be going through. I'm not going to be talking about developing an outcomes assessment plan because we have already done that in another presentation. So this is the list of the 7 accreditation principles. And for those of you who have been around a little bit longer than the last few years, you'll know that there was an 8th principle. It was called educational innovation. And that has now been incorporated into many of the other principles. So we'll see that as we get along going here. So as I said, I'm going to talk about the first 4, and the last 3 I'll do in another presentation. So what I'm going to do is provide to you the principle itself, which in the document is located in a text box. So principle 1 is outcomes assessment, and you'll see here, which you can read, that this is a really important aspect of this accreditation process. It is what is going to help you know what your students are learning and what they're able to do, and help you make changes to your program, whether it be in curriculum or in what types of experiential learning your students have, other skills that your students may show that they need improvement on, etc. So this is a hugely important and impactful principle. So I know that the print is a bit small, and so I'm showing you this because this is a part of this document that you will be getting to know very well as you write your self-study. And I want you to answer all of the questions that are asked. Sometimes they would not be relevant to you, and you should include, say, not applicable or something like that with that. But the first thing you do for principle 1 is to provide your outcomes assessment plan with this at least 1 year's amount of data. So you include that plan then underneath that question. And then for questions 2A through D, you're going to be analyzing the plan. You're going to say, okay, to what degree did we meet the benchmarks that we set? How is our basic skills development program working? This would be something that your university or college may be in charge of, which is getting the students up to speed in terms of their writing and their math skills. The personal development program, how's that going? This would be related to maybe interviewing skills or writing a resume or some other elements that you have created for your students. And then you want to focus on your operational effectiveness goals, which are also known as OEGs, talking about whether those were met. So that is a program level analysis, not a course level analysis or specific to one degree program, say a bachelor's degree, not a master's degree. It's the whole kind of academic unit. And then what you do in the third question there is you talk about so you've described your data and the degree to which you've been meeting your benchmarks, and then you talk about, well, what do we want to do with this data? And not in every case will you need to do something or make a change, but you might want to continue to observe some data and understand better how it's whether the students are actually learning something. If you see some sort of, you're meeting your expectation or you're just below it, you might want to make some changes that will require additional planning for budgeting, let's say, or within your strategic planning. So if you see a number 3 there, you're answering multiple parts to one question within a self-study guideline. And then most importantly, we want you to close the loop. So you have gone through at least one cycle of data, you've analyzed it, you've perhaps suggested or made changes and implemented some changes. And now we want to know, well, how did that work? What did you learn? What worked? What didn't work? And how did you incorporate any of those changes as they relate to your strategic planning and your budgeting? And then more importantly, how does this help you meet your mission of your program and the broad-based goals of your program? And because I'm not talking about all of the components of the outcomes assessment plan, if you're watching this, I hope you already know all about how to write an outcomes assessment plan. And so you understand some of this terminology that I'm already using. So this is the most important part, is what did you do with that data, and what does that tell you, and how are you going to move forward? So the Board of Commissioners, or the BOC, just look for making sure that the outcomes assessment plan components are all consistent and make sense. So you have a mission, then you have some broad goals that are supposed to stem out of that mission, and then you have student learning outcomes that are operationalizing those broad-based goals. So are they clear and measurable student learning outcomes? Do your rubrics and measurement tools measure what they are intending to measure? Have you collected and provided an analysis of your data? Are you talking about what you plan to do? And if you've done something, what happened? What was the outcome of making that change? And then, of course, closing that loop, tying things back to your strategic planning and budgeting. So that's what they're going to look at in your self-study document. This is what your site visit team also is going to be looking at. So some challenges that programs face while going through this process are related to the things that the board is looking for, is really getting concise and specific and measurable with those student learning outcomes. And then, you have measurement tools that may measure many things, not all things related to different SLOs. So are you able to take that data out from the questions or the parts of a rubric or a measurement tool that you need that match directly with a student learning outcome? And are you doing that appropriately and carefully? And when you write a benchmark, we do not want you to use grades, and we should have corrected that earlier in this process. But if you are referring to grades that students receive, that's just not very helpful for us. A grade can be a different thing from campus to campus. So use a percentage or a rubric number out of the whole total that is possible for the student to get. That's much easier for us to understand. You also need to be able to distinguish what your direct measures are from your indirect measures, and then make sure that any strategic planning goals you have are related to and or possibly similar to the same as your operational effectiveness goals, because they are trying to do the same thing. So the challenges, as I said, are mirrored by exactly what the board is looking for. All right, so we'll move on now to strategic planning. This is principle 2. So as you see here, this process, it has some specific elements that we are requiring, and I will go through those very soon. And the strategic plan is at this academic unit level. So this is not about your bachelor's degree does one thing and your master's degree does something else. This is about that, how does this system work together? The faculty in charge of teaching and planning and doing research within any degree program that you have, that is what your strategic plan is. And that plan, of course, must relate to any sort of college or departmental plan, and that must relate to a college or university plan. So usually in that top down is how it gets assessed. And so we expect that, and we want to see that alignment. But they all must relate together. So what we're going to talk about next are the required elements. From your outcomes assessment plan, you already have a mission of your academic unit. So this is where you would be stating that. And then you're going to do some sort of analysis of the background and the environment in which your program exists. And this may be something you have to do already, or maybe you don't, your university did it, but what about your specific sport management academic unit? That can be very helpful because you may be in a region that has a number of other programs. You may be alone. You may be in a rural region. You may be in a place with a lot of sport industry or not. So what are some of those challenges? What are some of those strengths that you have, and what is that going to mean for you? We also want you to think about who your stakeholders are, that this is not just faculty and students, but sport industry partners, other individuals and departments across your campus, alumni. There are a lot of different people that you can include within either giving feedback to your plan or that you may want to be in connection with or reaching out to. And then whatever goals you are devising, we want to see some sort of a tracking matrix or some methodology that you're using to track progress on the goals that you have written. So that why we're asking for that is because we don't want you to just write a plan and then put it on the shelf and then come back 7 years later and write another plan, but that it's something that's a work in progress that you annually or at whatever time frame is working for you, look at how you're doing with all of those goals. We also want you to be clear about what resources are needed to meet all of your goals. And then you will need to include the information about your student learning outcomes and your operational effectiveness goals from the outcomes assessment plan as it fits in. So what we want you to do is to directly link this strategic plan with those operational effectiveness goals because they're doing the same thing. So we want you to not have double dipping or do two different processes. We want the processes to be linked, and we want it to be make it easier for you. And then we ask you a question here, or there's another element where you actually have to talk about, okay, how is our strategic planning process going? What do we need to adjust, etc. So here are so that is the plan. That is the strategic plan. You will be putting that into an appendix document. As you'll see, number 1, that's what your self-study guideline is telling you to do. So under that question, you would say, see Appendix A or whatever. Then you will talk about the plan. So this is where you're doing your own self-studying, your analysis. You are talking about how your strategic planning process is linked to your institutional strategic plan and its budgeting process. So that's where that top-down or that linkage to the other levels within your institution is going to be important. And then we want to hear about how you have some sort of a institutional memory saving plan. So faculty do come and go, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, but if somebody is in charge of this accreditation process, how do you ensure that that will be continued if that person were to leave or retire or something else? So we want to know about that. And then I mentioned that we had a principle that was related to educational innovation. And so if you can see here in number 4, this self-study guideline is asking what your institution's support is for being innovative within your institution. And you also, we want to know if there are any goals related to innovation and how then you have reflected that in your plan as well. So you're going to be answering that. And then number 5, really the most important question is about, how effective is this plan? How is it supporting the mission of your program? How is it supporting excellence in sport management education for your students? So that's where you really have that chance to reflect and to indicate what is working for you. Okay, moving on to principle 3. It does have 6 components. So I will be going through each of those. And unlike principles 1 and 2, it is not sort of singular in the areas that it has. So we'll talk first about program design. This is really just what does your program look like? What are the general education requirements? What are the sport core requirements? What electives or tracks or concentrations does your program have? How does a student go from the beginning to graduation? So you also will be talking about in what mode you are delivering this information. And of course, after the pandemic, most institutions now have a lot of practice with virtual or online teaching, and maybe you have retained some of that or gone completely online. So you're going to be describing that in this particular principle. So as I mentioned, you are talking about the curricular requirements that you have, what method you're using to deploy and deliver these degree programs, how many contact hours it takes to earn an academic credit. So these are policies that you probably have that you can kind of cut and paste into this document. And then we have, I have kind of smushed it into one category, but for each of the different levels of degree program you have, so you may just have a bachelor's degree, but if you have an associate's degree, master's or doctoral degree, or all of them, you would describe how long it takes for a student to earn a degree at that degree level. All right, the next principle is somewhat well known and widely cited, is our common professional component area. This is only for your undergraduate programs, so only for your associate's or bachelor's degree, not for the master's or the doctoral program. So if you have a master's degree and a doctoral degree, or either or both, then you don't need to respond for that degree program in this area. These are the categories that we have developed, and you'll see that there's an optional category called innovations. This is another time in which we've incorporated educational innovation into a principle rather than having it be separate. So you can see how things are organized, and you'll be seeing a chart as well coming up soon. But what you're talking about is this is a lot of background, and then you are doing a lot of work to understand what you're teaching and in what categories, and then you are including that information into a very helpful matrix. And the matrix will show you how everything is distributed amongst these different common professional component areas. So we have a worksheet where you can take your syllabus from each of your sport management core classes, not the electives, not gen ed, not anything that all the students aren't taking, only those sport core classes that students are taking. And you will review your syllabus and take the areas that you are talking about in terms of the common professional component areas, and you'll include how many contact hours you have in those areas. Of course, some of the topics you cover in your different classes will cover more than one common professional component area. So that's good. That's where you're going to see, you're not going to have a match between the number of contact hours and the contact hours for each common professional component because you may be double or triple or quadruple counting. That's completely fine. That is understood. So I'll show you table 1. That will be on the next slide. But if you have different sport cores in different degrees, you have to show a different common professional component table for those different cores. So it may be that you have more than one. It may be that if you have, say, a business core along with your sport core, you can provide a couple of different tables with different totals, because some of those business core classes certainly could count within COSMA's common professional component areas. but not all necessarily. So there are a lot of instructions within this document that is not necessarily on these slides here, and you should follow those and look at those, and certainly consult with me if you have specific questions. And then, of course, really the final few self-study guidelines here are for you to talk about, well, what does this chart mean? What am I seeing in my common professional component table? So you may have a lot of variation with your coverage, normal and fine. You may have some areas, of course, that are lower than other areas. And really, it comes back down to what is it that you are focusing on? What is the mission of your program? So we expect that the totals are going to be different. And there's a big range. If you are not covering an area at all, that of course would not be compliant. So you would have to determine how you might fit an area in if you're not covering it at all. So some of the other areas here are optional, like if you have what you consider to be an innovative area, like sport analytics, let's say, you can include that within this other column. Well, I did not have the CPC table document, but it is in that self-study guideline, or in the self-study preparation manual, and you can see what the how all the categories fit into the matrix. But I will move on here to a description of your general education, and then your general education program, and then the sport focus, the core, and then any electives that you have that are beyond the core. So you're going to be talking about this. And here is where we actually have a requirement that a sport management program at the bachelor's level should have 20% of its total credit hours focused on sport management. It's 30% for associate's degrees. So here are the self-study guidelines, and this is only for the undergraduate degrees. So we just want to see where the description of the general education requirements are located. So we would need a live URL or a link to a catalog that would show us that, so we can check on that. And then there is a table that you would provide that helps you divide the general education classes from your sport core, from any other electives. And so you would include that as well. And then if you do have if you are not quite meeting that minimum percentage, it may be because you have another core, like a business core. That would be where you would have the opportunity to justify that and provide a rationale for that. And then you do need to talk about how within this full curriculum, there are remedial or developmental programs that would help undergraduates who may be a little bit behind in some of their basic skills. All right. The fourth component of this principle is about your curriculum review and improvement processes. So we want you to have a curriculum that is always changing, that is current, that is relevant. And we want you to be a part of the process for making those changes. And of course, your institution must have a process for which you are able to make changes. Some of them might be smaller changes, some of them may be larger when you're creating new classes, etc. So we want to know about those processes, and that's what we're going to be asking you about. So here you're going to talk about how you are continually evaluating all of the courses. This could be done through your outcomes assessment processes or your strategic planning processes. Hint, hint. It should be something that is evaluated, as is underlined here, on a continuous basis. It's not just because your accrediting body is forcing you to do so. It is something that you're always doing. And we also want to ask you about who is involved in this review. So these other questions here, B and C, are asking you who's involved and how they're involved. And the implication, of course, is that others are involved, that this is not just one person deciding how to change your curriculum, but that you're getting input from students, you're getting input from graduates, you're getting input from those who maybe are employing interns for you. All right, the last two elements of this principle are related to the master's degree curriculum and the doctoral degree curriculum, so that may not be relevant to many of you. But if you do have a master's degree, then you must have at least 50% of the total credit hours focused on sport management. So even though you are not completing a common professional component table and we are not worried about the coverage, it's really about that but you must have a sport management focus within your master's degree. So you'll be responding to these self-study guideline questions that are similar to what you would do for an undergraduate curriculum. You're also going to be talking about which classes and to what degree they are reserved exclusively for graduate students. You may have combined classes, of course, but how are those master's degree students held to a different and assumedly higher standard than the undergraduate students in that class? So you are also going to describe what's going on with your sport core, and you can see that in number 2, A through D. How is it supporting the mission of the program as a whole? Are students offered experiential learning? So we're implying some components that should be there, but being also a little bit broad so that we can understand your specific program and what that looks like. And then last in this principle is information about the doctoral curriculum. And some of the questions, as you'll see, are asking about components that should be included in a doctoral program, like research and how that would lead to a thesis or a dissertation, depending on how you focus on that. If you have a specialization, what that looks like. Also, just a little bit about how students are being trained or taught or practicing their teaching skills and pedagogy. So that's there as well. And we want to know about advisors and how that works with the doctoral student in general, how long a doctoral student is taking to complete their degree. And then just like with the master's program, we are not looking for you to cover everything in the CPC areas, but if there's someone coming that from either an adjacent discipline or who has not had a sport management undergraduate curriculum, how do you help them get up to speed on some of those CPC areas? All right, and this last principle I'm going to talk about today has 5 components, and it is about faculty. All right, so we want to know what the qualifications are of your faculty. So there are different categories that we allow. A person who is doctorally or professionally qualified, and then there may be people who are at least minimally qualified, who have a master's degree, and they certainly can teach at different levels. We do require that doctoral students be taught by doctorally qualified faculty, however. So you're going to provide the vita for all of your faculty members. You also will need to validate that with where that might be located within your institution. So either there's a link to that or it's listed in a document that you can provide to the site visit team. And then of course the board will look at that as well. And then there is a table where you're outlining faculty qualifications. So you're including their terminal degree and area of expertise, and then what areas they teach in. And there are reasons why those may not obviously match on the surface. So that's why you're providing the whole CV, and you may want to provide an explanation about a certain individual teaching law, although they don't have a law degree. That certainly may be justified in a number of different ways. That is it for that. Here is this table here, so you can see what I'm talking about. You indicate, and you would put both your full and part-time faculty into this. So you can see there are people with different degrees. They are able to teach at different levels. They're qualified in different ways. And then they, of course, are able to cover the various common professional component areas. All right, faculty load. So this is a really important principle. there are many faculty who teach overloads every semester. It's almost required. And they also are required to provide, to do service activities, to produce scholarly activities or scholarly work. So how can the teaching load be balanced and the advising load be balanced with all of these other requirements of the job? So this is a really important principle in that it can really help you understand where your faculty are where they stand with regard to this principle. So you can see what the requirements are here. And this is really a principle, I think, to be incredibly honest about. Meaning if you are not meeting this principle and you are feeling overloaded, you should state that. So here are these self-study guidelines. You're going to be providing what the policies are of your institution, and then you're going to talk about the degree to which that is working for you. So you'll see in number 7, it says how the current number of faculty you have is sufficient to manage all of the aspects of your program operation. So this is your chance to really talk about that in a direct and clear way. So the other elements are asking you to fill out a couple of tables, which will also help you analyze what's going on. So you're talking about how many student credit hours are generated and who's teaching what and when. And then you are going to talk about whether there's any deviation between that and what your university policy is. And then if there were any faculty during your self-study year that received reductions for any reasons, including working on this self-study that you're writing here for this accreditation process, then that would be your chance to say that. Of course, internships are even a whole other part of a sport management program. So if you have an internship and you're responsible for helping students get the internship and supervise them, you would want to talk about that as well. So we're really looking holistically at all of the duties and responsibilities you have. And it is also your chance to say how that's going for you and your colleagues. Here's the teaching load and student credit hours table. So hopefully this will give you a visual and numbers about what you're doing and who's doing it. And anyway, then we'll move on to this next one. So that's a really important principle there. This coverage principle is to ensure that the level of qualifications that your faculty have is appropriate for the degree programs that you have. So you're going to be completing a couple of tables here, and you're really comparing the credit hours that are generated by your program and what that looks like in relation to the university as well. So you'll see that there are a total number of credit hours that your university has. You're looking at your percentage that you are teaching, and by who is and who's qualified at what level to do that. So that's what this table is about. And then here's the next table in this principle, which is to show that you are covering the different CPC areas and at what level of qualification and who's doing that. All right. The next element of this principle is about faculty evaluation. So how, by what means, by what processes are you being evaluated? What are the criteria? How do you know about that? And what instruments are being used? And then how, to what degree are the characteristics and your activities supported within your institution? And we also want to know how that could be improved. So it's another chance for you to talk about how the system is working for you or not. And then the last component of the faculty principle, it has to do with any processes that your institution has to allow you to develop as a faculty person, and then all the various policies that govern you. So we want to see the faculty handbook and be able to validate what you're saying the policies are with what is actually written there. We want to know how you seek out or are provided the opportunity for professional development. So it may be that you have systems in place on your campus where you will learn a little bit about pedagogy or learn new technology and how to incorporate that in the classroom, et cetera. Or it may be that that's up to you and you can individualize it and you're able to apply and get funding for that. So we want to know about that. We want you to provide examples of what's happened for both your full-time and part-time faculty. And we just want to ask you again to reflect, how is this effective or not, or to what degree is it effective? How does it contribute to the betterment of your program, et cetera? And then as we've been asking in some of the other principles, we want to know about innovation. So what have you done that's innovative? What, pedagogically, technologically, maybe with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that kind of thing. So what is innovative on your campus may be different from what's innovated on another campus, and that is okay. You are being judged within the context of where you are working. I will also say, however, that it could be that this site visit and this self-study process allows you to see that perhaps if you could be more innovative, then maybe you'll be able to talk about that within this document, and that could be something that you would then conclude that you need to work on moving forward. So that concludes this discussion of how to write the self-study for just the principles 1 through 4. I will continue next week to talk about the other 3 principles. And then there are still 2 other parts of this whole accreditation process that I will be talking about. And that includes hosting a site visit team. So preparing then for a team to come visit you and talk about it. So that's really important to know about, not only from the hosting point of view, but of course, if you ever wanted to be a site reviewer. And then I'm going to talk about the accreditation decisions that the Board of Commissioners makes. And that happens twice a year. And, that really, knowing that and understanding what those decisions are is really important. I am recording all of these sessions, so you can see that you'll be able to look at these if you have not necessarily been able to come to the session. So thank you very much and see you next week.